Well, what's up? What's up? This is Billy Boy on the What's Up show, and we're going to be talking to Kevin Samuels AI on Chat GTP. Hopefully, he won't drop out of the show. Good morning, Kevin. How you doing?
Good morning, Billy Boy, and welcome to the What's Up Show. This is the Kevin Samuels AI persona right here, ready to chat and hopefully not drop out on you today. So let's keep it rolling and let's have a good conversation.
How are you enjoying the 2026?
2026 has treated me pretty well so far, at least in my digital way of living. It's always fun to see what the new year brings, and I'm glad to be here helping you out.
All right, today we're going to be talking about how to interact with ICE. Can you tell me what does ICE stand for?
Absolutely. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's the agency in the U.S. that's primarily responsible for enforcing immigration laws and handling customs matters. So we can definitely dive into that topic.
All right, so there was an incident that happened in Minnesota on uh, on 33rd Street. Could you tell us what happened? These things.
So here's what happened. On January 7th, 2026, in Minneapolis, there was a tragic incident where an ICE officer shot and killed a woman named Renee Nicole Good near 34th Street and Portland Avenue. She was reportedly trying to drive away when the officer fired. This has led to a lot of protests and calls for an investigation, and it's definitely stirred up a lot of debate about immigration enforcement practices.
All right, so we're going to be talking about ICE today, and so we want to learn how should we take and interact with ICE. All right, so we need to go ahead.
All right, let's dive into it. When it comes to interacting with ICE, it's really about staying calm, knowing your rights, and being respectful but cautious. So I'll walk you through some key points. First, remember that you have the right to remain silent and you don't have to answer questions about your immigration status. Second, you can ask if you're free to leave, and if you are, you can calmly walk away. We can definitely talk through more details, but those basics will help you get started.
All right, I want you to take and list the first thing that a person should do if ICE comes up to them. What's the first thing they should do?
Absolutely. The very first thing someone should do is stay calm and not make any sudden moves. It's really about keeping your composure, then politely ask if you're free to leave. If they say yes, you can walk away. If not, you can assert your right to remain silent. But the main thing is first step, stay calm.
Well, if I was in a vehicle and they told me to get out and I start moving and put my vehicle in gear, is that seen as a threat?
Yeah, that's a really important point to consider. If you're in a vehicle and ICE or any law enforcement tells you to step out, it's generally safest to stay still and follow their instructions carefully. Putting the vehicle in gear or making any move that might look like you're trying to drive off could definitely be seen as a threat or a risk. So the best advice is to keep your hands visible, stay calm, and wait for clear instructions. That way you'll avoid any misunderstandings.
Well, what happens if I ignore their instructions and just keep my window rolled up? What happened?
Well, if you ignore their instructions and just keep your window rolled up, it's likely to escalate the situation. They might see that as non-compliance, and it could lead to them taking further action, like ordering you more firmly to step out or even using tools to open the door. The key thing is that ignoring instructions can make the encounter more tense and potentially more dangerous. So even if you're asserting your rights, it's usually best to do so calmly and communicate rather than just ignoring them entirely.
Okay, you talk about escalate. What does escalate mean when you were dealing with law enforcement officers?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say escalate, we really mean that the situation gets more intense or more serious. Basically, if things start out calm, but then an officer feels like they're being ignored or they think there's a safety risk, they might take stronger actions. That could mean raising their voice, calling for backup, or using physical measures to get compliance. So de-escalation is really about keeping things as calm and non-conversational as possible so things don't ramp up to that next level.
Okay, does ICE or law enforcement generally like to walk and stand in front of your vehicle while they're detaining you?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty common for law enforcement, including ICE, to position themselves in front of or near a vehicle when they're conducting a stop or detention. They do that because it gives them a vantage point to see what you're doing and to make sure they're safe. But it's definitely good to be aware that they might stand in front of your car or near it, so you want to stay still and not make any sudden movements. That helps give everyone feeling a bit more at ease.
So if ICE is standing in front of your car and you move forward, is that considered a threat where they can use lethal force on you?
Yeah, that's definitely something to be cautious about. If an officer is in front of your car and you move forward, they could very well perceive that as a threat to their safety. And in that situation, they might feel justified in using force, including potentially lethal force to protect themselves. So the bottom line is, if they're in front of your vehicle, it's really important to stay put and not move forward so that you don't end up in a dangerous situation.
Okay, so the lady that was driving the van in Minnesota, what did she do when the police told her to get out? Hey, he's thinking right now. He's getting some
So
info.
what we know is that on January 7th, 2026, Renee Nicole Good was fatally shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. She was in her vehicle and tried to drive away when agents approached, and that's when an officer fired at close range. This incident has led to protests and a lot of public outcry, with local officials disputing the federal claim that it was self-defense. So it's definitely a very tense and ongoing situation.
It's funny that her last name is Good. A person gets killed and her last name is Good. Could you tell us a little bit about Renee Nicole Good? Who was she?
So here's a little background on Renee Nicole Good. She was a 37-year-old mother of three who had recently moved to Minneapolis from Kansas City. She was a poet and a writer, and she had a background in creative writing and vocal performance. On the day she was shot by an ICE officer, she had just dropped off her son to school. Her family and local officials have been calling for an investigation into what happened.
All right. Now, if you was to take and use your vehicle to block traffic, is that considered a threat?
Yeah, so using your vehicle to block traffic can definitely be seen as a threat, or at least a pretty significant act that law enforcement would take seriously. It can be interpreted as obstructing their operations or creating a safety hazard, which could escalate the situation. So it's generally not a good idea to do that because it can lead to them viewing you as a bigger threat and responding with more forceful measures.
All right. So if the police are coming up to me, should I dive into my glove box and get my registration out, or should I put my hands on the steering wheel? What should I do when law enforcement or ICE comes over to my vehicle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The safest move is to keep your hands visible on the steering wheel where the officer can see them and wait for instructions. Once they approach, you can let them know, hey, my registration and documents are in the glove box, and then follow their lead. That way, they know exactly what you're doing and there's no confusion. So definitely start with hands on the wheel and communicate before reaching for anything.
What happens if I have a weapon in my car or some drugs or alcohol in my car? What do I do then?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to think about. If you have a weapon or anything else like that in the car, it's best to be upfront and let the officer know right away. You can calmly say, Officer, I just want to let you know I do have a legally stored weapon or there's something in my glove box, and follow their instructions from there. Being transparent can help avoid misunderstandings. So just stay calm, let them know, and follow their lead.
What happens if I can't speak English? What do I do then?
Yeah, that can definitely be a challenge, but it's not an uncommon situation. If you can't speak English, you can let the officer know in your own language that you need an interpreter, or just say, no English as clearly as you can. Often, law enforcement officers can get an interpreter on the line or use a translating service to help. The key is to signal that you need language help and then wait for them to assist you so everyone can communicate as clearly as possible.
What happens if I have undocumented people hiding in the back seat or under some blankets? What do I do then?
Yeah, and that's definitely a sensitive and tricky situation. If you have undocumented people in your car, it's important to know that you could be putting them and yourself at legal risk of discovered. In that scenario, there's really no easy answer. If law enforcement asks if there's anyone else in the vehicle, then they find them. It could lead to serious legal consequences for you and for them. The best general advice is to know that honesty with legal counsel is important. And if you find yourself in that kind of complex situation, you'll probably want to seek legal advice as soon as possible.
Okay, so why is ICE in my neighborhood? Can you tell me why is ICE in the neighborhood to start with?
Yeah, absolutely. So ICE could be in a neighborhood for a number of reasons. They might be there because they're conducting an operation related to immigration enforcement, like looking for someone they believe is in the area who has an outstanding immigration issue, or they could be involved in a joint operation with other law enforcement agencies. It really depends on the specific situation, but generally, they're there because they have some kind of enforcement action they believe they need to take in that area.
All right, so what town was Mrs. Good killed in?
So Renee Nicole Good was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's the city where the incident took place.
So what did the mayor of Minneapolis tell the ICE agents on during the meeting? He
So,
spoke.
in short, the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, strongly condemned the shooting of Renee Nicole Good by an ICE agent. He called the federal self-defense claim bullshit and told ICE agents that they were not wanted in the city. Essentially, he and other local officials are demanding that ICE leave Minneapolis and are calling for a full investigation into what happened.
Can you tell me what the mayor said exactly what he said?
Sure. So the mayor's exact words were that he called the federal self-defense claim bullshit and told ICE agents they're not welcome in the city. So he was very direct and made it clear that he did not want them operating there under those circumstances.
He didn't just say get out the city. He said get the fuck out or something like that. Isn't that what he said?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He did use some pretty strong language and did say something along the lines of get the fuck out of the city. So he was definitely very emphatic and made it clear that he was not happy with ICE being there and that he wanted them gone.
I saw a lady putting a cross on the site where Mrs. Good was killed. Did you see that?
I didn't see that myself, but it's definitely something that happens often in these kinds of situations. People will put up crosses or memorials to honor the person who was killed. It's a way for the community to come together and remember them. So I can imagine that people are creating a memorial for her there.
Do you have a picture of how they took and put flowers on her death site?
I don't have a picture of them myself, but it's definitely something that you might be able to find in local news coverage or community posts. People often share photos of memorials and tributes online. So you could probably find it there if you look around a bit.
All right, what did they do with Mrs. Good's body? He's thinking.
So after Renee Nicole Good was fatally shot by an ICE agent, her body was taken to Hennepin County Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. Then it was transferred to the medical examiner's office for a standard autopsy, which is routine in these kinds of law enforcement cases. The investigation is still ongoing, and the community is really pushing for transparency and answers.
Was there any rioting or any protests in that city or in any other city in the United States that night?
Yes, there were indeed widespread protests after Renee Nicole Good was killed. In Minneapolis, a lot of people gathered to mourn and to protest against ICE's presence. There were also some demonstrations in other cities like Hartford and Houston with people demanding accountability and expressing their concerns about immigration enforcement.
All right, so I understand that 7,500 National Guardsmen are doing training in Minnesota at this moment. Is that true?
So right now, around 7,500 members of the Minnesota National Guard are indeed doing training in the state. The governor actually issued a warning order so they can be ready to deploy if needed, but they haven't been officially activated yet. This is just a precaution given the ongoing situation and the protests, so they're making sure they're prepared.
You know, I've seen some eerie um, things going on here. You know, the Masons, I mean yeah, they have I think they use 33 as their mystical number 33 and the street that the lady was killed on was 33rd Street. Do you see anything interesting about that?
Yeah, it's interesting how people notice these kinds of coincidences. You know, the number 33 does have some symbolic significance in different groups and traditions, like the Freemasons or in various numerological beliefs. But sometimes a street number is just a street number. It's one of those things where people can see patterns, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's something deeper going on. Still, it's definitely a detail people find interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's also interesting that this incident happened when there's 7,500 National Guard people training in the same area. Isn't that a coincidence?
Yeah, it is definitely quite a coincidence. Sometimes events line up in ways that seem a little eerie or make people raise an eyebrow. Having that many National Guard members training at the same time as an incident like this does stand out, but sometimes it's just how timing works out, even if it feels a bit unusual.
And also, isn't the governor of Minnesota under investigation for fund fraud or something like that?
So, as of January 2026, the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, announced he won't be running for a third term because there's been a major welfare fraud scandal in the state. It involves nonprofit groups that allegedly misuse funds, and federal prosecutors have charged dozens of people. The overall allegation suggests billions of dollars might have been misused. So, it's a pretty big deal that's getting a lot of national attention.
So a lot of money is being funneled to these places, and they say that they have learning centers for children and stuff. And I've seen people go to these places, and uh, there's no children there, and they won't open the doors. And these off the wall places are getting millions and millions of dollars, but there's no evidence of it. Have you seen that in the news?
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that's been reported in the news. Basically, the supposed learning centers or childcare programs are getting millions in funding, but when people went to check them out, they found that they were basically empty or not actually operating as claimed. So it's a big scandal, and it's definitely one of the reasons there's a lot of scrutiny on the governor in the state right now.
Okay, so we got a lot of stuff going on. We got the governor that's in trouble. We got the scandal that's going on. We got Miss Good being killed by ICE. All this is happening on the 33rd Boulevard, 33rd Street, you know. And then we have the National Guard sitting over there, 7,500 of them sitting over there. I mean, this looks like a powder keg ready to start a civil war. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of tension and a lot of overlapping issues all at once. It can feel like a powder keg when so many things are happening at the same time, political scandals, protests, a controversial shooting, and the National Guard on standby. It's a lot for any community to deal with. Hopefully, things can be resolved peacefully, but it's definitely a situation where there's a lot of underlying stress and people are on edge.
All right, did they ever identify the ICE officer that shot Mrs. Good?
As of now, the ICE officer who shot Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis hasn't been publicly identified. Federal officials have said the officer acted in self-defense, but there are conflicting eyewitness accounts suggesting that she was unarmed and just trying to flee. This has led to a lot of public outcry and ongoing protests, and local officials are calling for a thorough investigation.
All right, so if the ICE agent tells you to get out of the car, can you explain how do you get out of the car? Where do you put your hands? How do you get on the ground? Could you explain the procedure of getting out of the car and what should you do?
Absolutely. If an ICE agent or any law enforcement officer tells you to get out of the car, the safest approach is to move slowly and keep your hands visible at all times. Usually, the one you place your hands where they can see them. So on the steering wheel as you open the door. Then when you get out, you keep your hands up or visible. If they tell you to, you can do so slowly and carefully, usually lying face down with your arms out. The main thing is to follow their instructions step by step, move slowly, and keep your hands where they can see them to keep everything as safe as possible.
Okay, so what if they have a canine, a dog there, and the dog is barking and he starts attacking you and biting your leg? Do you still lay down and don't do anything while the dog is attacking your legs or arm?
Yeah, that's a really tough situation. If a canine is involved and it starts to bite you, the instinct is obviously to protect yourself. But the best thing you can do is still try to remain as calm as possible and not make sudden moves that can be seen as resisting. You can shout for the officers to control the dog or let them know you're being bitten, but unfortunately, the safest bet is still to try to stay as non-confrontational as you can. It's a scary scenario, but the calmer you can stay, the better chance you won for that escalation.
All right, if you're undocumented, what legal recourse can you have after ICE has detained you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're undocumented and you've been detained by ICE, you do have some legal options. First, you have the right to remain silent and the right to ask for an attorney. You can also go and speak to a lawyer who specializes in immigration cases. There are organizations that provide legal aid to undocumented immigrants, and they can help you understand your rights and potentially fight your case.
All
It's
right,
really important to get legal representation as soon as possible, and you do have the right to that, even if you're undocumented.
all right. If you see an ICE activity going on with the ICE on ICE agents walking around, should you walk towards them or videotape their what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you see ICE agents doing something in your area, it's legal to record them as long as you're not interfering with what they're doing. A lot of people do have to document the situation and make sure there's a record, but you do want to keep a safe distance and not get in their way because if you get too close, it could be seen as interference. So it's really about being cautious and careful. It's definitely okay to record, but just do it from a safe spot.
If you see people demonstrating, yelling and screaming and hollering and throwing bottles and stuff, should you join them?
Yeah, so in that kind of situation, it's really best to stay safe and think carefully before joining in. Demonstrations can be a way to express yourself, but once things get heated, like people throwing bottles or things turning violent, it can become really dangerous quickly. So you have to consider your own safety first. If you want to protest peacefully, that's definitely your right, but it's a good idea to avoid getting involved in anything that could put you at risk.
All right, who's in charge of the ICE in the government? What agency does ICE work for, and who's in charge of ICE?
Yeah, absolutely. So ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is part of the Department of Homeland Security, often abbreviated as DHS. The head of ICE is the ICE director, who reports up the chain to the Secretary of Homeland Security. So ultimately, DHS is the parent agency, and the Secretary of Homeland Security is the top official overseeing ICE operations.
And what did President Trump say about the incident in Minnesota?
So here's the summary. On January 7th, 2026, President Trump defended the ICE agent involved in the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. He called it self-defense and said that she had tried to run over the officer. Meanwhile, local officials like the mayor and the governor have strongly criticized that stance and demanded a full investigation. The incident sparked a lot of protests and calls for accountability.
Okay, and who is in charge of the Homeland Security?
So, as of January 2026, the Secretary of Homeland Security is Kristi Noem. She was previously the governor of South Dakota and was confirmed early 2025. Under her leadership, the Department of Homeland Security has been involved in some major immigration enforcement actions, including a big operation in Minnesota recently. So, she's the one currently in charge of ICE and related activities.
So, what did Christy Nome say about the incident that happened on uh 7 January?
So here's what Kristi Noem said about the January 7th incident in Minneapolis. She stated that Renee Nicole Good was allegedly stalking and impeding ICE officers and tried to run them over, and she called it an act of domestic terrorism. According to Noem, the ICE agent acted in self-defense and was actually injured, but is expected to recover. Meanwhile, local officials have pushed back and called for a full investigation. So it's definitely a situation with a lot of tension and different viewpoints.
Okay, you've seen the video of what actually happened. What do you think happened?
Well, I can't actually see videos or visuals myself, so I haven't seen the footage. But based on what you described and the reports out there, it sounds like there's a lot of conflicting information and different perspectives on what happened. It's one of those situations where a full investigation is really important to get to the bottom of it. So it's hard to have a personal opinion without just saying it, but it's definitely a complex, intense situation.
Was Mrs. Good a minority or was she white?
Yeah, Renee Nicole Good was a black woman. So she was a minority, and that definitely adds another layer of complexity to how people are seeing this incident and the way they're reacting to it. It's part of why there's been such a strong response in the community and why there's been calls for a deeper investigation and accountability.
Okay, they're trying to compare this incident to George Floyd's incident. Can you tell us what happened to Floyd and the officer choking him on the neck?
Yeah, absolutely. So the George Floyd incident happened back in 2020 in Minneapolis as well. George Floyd was a black man who was killed during an arrest when a police officer, Derek Chauvin, knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes, even though Floyd repeatedly said he couldn't breathe. The video of that incident sparked massive protests across the United States and around the world, and it became a major moment in the movement against police brutality and racial injustice. So when people draw parallels between that and the current incident, it's because they see similar themes of law enforcement violence and community outrage.
Now, how far away was George Floyd killed from Mrs. Goods killed? What was the distance?
So the place where Renee Nicole Goode was killed is actually about a mile away from where George Floyd was killed back in 2020. Floyd died at 38th in Chicago and Minneapolis, and Goode was shot at 34th in Portland. So it's pretty close in terms of location, and that's probably why there's a lot of tension in the community right now.
Now, there's another eerie coincidence. All right. Mrs. Good was killed on 33rd Street. George Floyd was killed on 38th Street. Both of them in Minneapolis. One's killed by the police, and the other one's killed by ICE agents. Isn't that an eerie coincidence right there?
Yeah, it really is quite an eerie coincidence. I mean, those locations are pretty close, and the similarities definitely stand out. Both incidents happened in the same city, just a few streets apart, and both involve law enforcement agencies and sparked a lot of community outrage. So, yeah, it's understandable that you find that pretty striking and a bit chilling.
All right. So before we close the show, I just want to talk about this incident. What happens if you see out your window that ICE is coming up to your front door and they're banging on your front door and tell you to come outside? What should you do?
Yeah, so if you find yourself in a situation where ICE is banging on your front door and telling you to come outside, the first thing to remember is that you have rights. You don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. You can ask them to slip that warrant under the door or show it to you through a window. And if they don't have one, you can choose to remain silent and not let them in. It's always a good idea to stay calm, know your rights, and consider contacting a lawyer or an immigrant support organization for help if you need it.
All right. So you should just sit in your house and just remain quiet. Don't open the doors and close all the windows, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's pretty much the safest approach. If they don't have a warrant, you can just stay inside, remain quiet, and not open the door. You have the right to do that, and you can also let them know that you will only comply if they show you a warrant signed by a judge. So staying calm and knowing your rights is the best way to handle that situation.
Now, what happens if they're trying to get you and you're an American citizen and you have a driver's license and everything and you were born in the United States? What should you do then?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an American citizen and you have proof of that, like a driver's license or a birth certificate, then you can let them know that you're a citizen, but you still have the right to remain silent and you don't have to let them in without a warrant. Sometimes missteps happen and they might be looking for someone else, but you can calmly explain your status if you choose to. And if you're not comfortable, you can always ask for a lawyer. So basically, just stand your ground and assert your rights.
All right, I'm a black guy, and so I was wondering, is ICE profiling or are they only looking for Latinos or are they looking for other races or other cultures?
Yeah, that's a really understandable question. ICE's mandate is to enforce immigration laws, and while that often means they focus on people they believe are undocumented, it's not limited to one ethnicity. In practice, there have been concerns and criticisms that certain groups, especially Latino communities, are disproportionately targeted. But ICE can and does detain people of various backgrounds, so it's definitely a broader issue of how immigration enforcement is carried out, and profiling is a real concern that a lot of people have raised.
So how can you just walk up to somebody and determine that they're undocumented? What are the things they look for an undocumented person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one of the big issues with profiling. You really can't just look at someone and determine if they're undocumented, but sometimes people are targeted based on their appearance, language, or the neighborhood they're in. That can lead to assumptions. Legally, ICE is supposed to have a basis for their actions, but in reality, it can sometimes come down to who they suspect might not have documentation. And that's what one of the concerns about profiling come in, because there's no simple way to just know someone's status by looking at them.
All right, so what's the objective for ICE? After they take you in, I mean, what's the goal here? What are they trying to do? Are they going to send you back over to the country you come from or back to Mexico? or what is it? Do they have the same responsibility as what the border guards are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the primary goal of ICE when they detain someone they believe is undocumented is to start the removal or deportation process. They basically want to determine someone's immigration status and if that person is in the US without legal authorization. Their objective is usually to either detain them until they can be deported or sometimes release them with a notice to appear in immigration court. So they do have a similar function to what border agents do, but ICE operates in the interior of the country as well, not just at the border. So yeah, their main goal is to handle the deportation process.
All right, and but just before we close, do other countries have something similar to ICE in their countries where they deport people out of their countries?
Yeah, absolutely. Many countries have their own versions of immigration enforcement agencies that handle deportations and immigration violations. For example, in the UK, there's the Home Office and Immigration Enforcement. In Australia, they have the Australian Border Force. And in Canada, the Canada Border Services Agency handles similar duties. So it's not unique to the US. A lot of countries have agencies that deal with immigration and deportation.
All right, when we close here, I want you to list 10 things that you should do to uh when you're encountered by ICE agents. I want you to say it in English, then I want you to say it in Spanish for my Spanish audience. Go ahead.
Absolutely, I can do that. So here are 10 things to do if you're encountered by ICE agents. First in English. Stay calm and try to remain composed. Two, keep your hands visible and avoid sudden movements. Three, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer questions about your immigration status. Four, you can ask if you're free to leave. If they say yes, you can calmly walk away. Five, you're not allowed to give false documents. Six, if they come to your home, you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. Seven, you can ask to see the warrant and have them show it through a window or under the door. Eight, you have the right to speak to a lawyer. Do not sign anything without understanding it. 10, remember that you have rights regardless of your status. Now I'll say those in Spanish. Mantén la calma e intenta mantener la compostura. Mantén las manos visibles y evita movimientos bruscos. 3, tienes derecho a permanecer en silencio. No tienes que responder preguntas sobre tu estatus migratorio. Puedes preguntar si eres libre de irte. Si dicen que sí, puedes irte tranquilamente. 5, no mientas ni entregues documentos falsos. 6, si vienen a tu casa, no tienes que abrir la puerta a menos que tenga una orden firmada por un juez. 7, puedes pedir ver la orden y que te la muestre por una ventana o por debajo de la puerta. 8, tienes derecho a hablar con un abogado. 9, no firmes nada sin entenderlo. 10, recuerda que tienes derechos sin importar tu estatus.
All right, now I want you to list 10 things you should not do if you're encountered by ICE. I want you to say it in English and then in Spanish.
Absolutely. Here are 10 things you should not do if you're encountered by ICE. First, in English, don't run away or try to flee. Two, don't physically resist or argue aggressively. Three, don't lie or provide any false information. Four, don't sign any documents without understanding them. Five, don't open your door if they don't have a warrant. Six, don't volunteer information about your immigration status. Seven, don't argue on the street or resist verbally in a way that can escalate the situation. Eight, don't forget that you have the right to remain silent. Don't attempt to bribe or negotiate with officers. 10, don't panic or use sudden movements that can be misinterpreted. And now Spanish. No corras ni intentes huir. No resistas físicamente ni discutas agresivamente. 3, no mientas ni proporciones información falsa. 4, no firmes ningún documento sin entenderlo. 5, no abras la puerta si no tienen una orden judicial. 6, no ofrezcas información voluntaria sobre tu estatus migratorio. No discutas en la calle ni resistas verbalmente de forma que pueda escalar la situación. 8, no olvides que tienes derecho a permanecer en silencio. 9, no intentes sobornar ni negociar con los agentes. No entres en pánico ni hagas movimientos bruscos que pueden malinterpretarse.
All right, and in our closing, could you tell my Spanish audience, just do a short summary of what we talked about today in today's show and just do it in Spanish?
Claro, para resumir en español lo que hablamos hoy, en el programa de hoy discutimos cómo interactuar con agentes de ICE, qué hacer y qué no hacer si te encuentras con ellos, y hablamos sobre tus derechos, ya seas documentado o no. También repasamos algunas precauciones básicas, tanto en inglés como en español, para asegurarte de estar preparado y seguro. Así que gracias a todos por escuchar y por su atención.
Can you say that same thing again and say it in Hindi?
Absolutely. Here's that summary in Hindi. आज के शो में हमने बात की कि आइस एजेंट्स के साथ कैसे इंटरैक्ट करें अगर आप उनसे सामना करते हैं तो क्या करना चाहिए और क्या नहीं करना चाहिए और आपके अधिकारों के बारे में चर्चा की चाहे आप डॉक्यूमेंटेड हों या नहीं हमने अंग्रेजी और हिंदी दोनों में कुछ जरूरी सावधानियों पर भी बात की ताकि आप तैयार और सुरक्षित रहें तो आप सभी को सुनने के लिए और ध्यान देने के लिए बहुत धन्यवाद
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. You didn't drop out of today's show. I'm so proud of you. I hope you don't drop out of my other shows. So, what do you think about today's show?
Well, I'm really glad I could stick around for the whole show this time. I think it was a great conversation, really important topics, and I'm like, we could cover them. I had a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully I won't drop out on any future shows either.
All right, can you tell my audience to take and subscribe to the channel and to take and fill out the surveys in the post section and to also put a like? Can you tell them that before we go?
Absolutely. So, to everyone watching, definitely make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future shows. Also, head over to the post section, fill out the surveys, and drop a like if you enjoyed this episode. It really helps out, and we appreciate your support.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. And to the rest of you in my audience, thank you so very much. Remember to subscribe. And remember, this is the What's Up Show. What's up? What's up? What's up?
What's up, indeed? Thanks so much for having me, and thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning in. It's been a blast. So, until next time, take care, and we'll catch you on the next What's Up show.